The scent of expensive pine and imported lilies filled the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, but to me, it smelled like a funeral. Specifically, the funeral of my dignity. It was December 23rd, the night of the annual Sterling and Cumber Christmas Gala, an event that was supposed to be the pinnacle of the corporate year. Outside, Manhattan was blanketed in a deceptive, pristine white snow, shimmering under the city lights. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the artificial warmth of social climbing and the sharp, icy edge of corporate cruelty. I stood near the buffet table, clutching a glass of sparkling cider that had long since gone flat. I wasn't wearing a designer gown like the other women in the room. I was wearing a simple, off-the-rack black dress I'd bought on sale. And in this room of wolves dressed in cashmere, I might as well have been wearing a Target. For 3 years, I had been the invisible backbone of Sterling & Co. As the senior executive assistant to Julian Sterling, I knew where every body was buried, every tax loophole was hidden, and every mistress was kept. I worked 18-hour days, skipped my own family's funerals, and spent my last 3 Christmases in a cold office while Julian toasted to his own brilliance at parties like this. I was the one who drafted the merger agreements that saved the firm in July. I was the one who managed the crisis when the London branch nearly folded in October. But to Julian, I wasn't an asset. I was a tool, a disposable piece of office equipment that he expected to function perfectly without ever needing maintenance or recognition. The music was a soft, mocking jazz rendition of Silent Night when Julian decided it was time for his annual State of the Firm address. He stood on the podium, the golden light of the chandeliers reflecting off his perfectly groomed hair and his $5,000 tuxedo. He looked like the hero of a story he didn't deserve to be in. Next to him stood Sarah, a woman who had been hired 3 months ago as a consultant, but whose primary job seemed to be laughing at Julian's jokes and wearing increasingly shorter skirts. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with a false sense of camaraderie. "This has been a year of unprecedented growth. We've broken records, shattered ceilings, and solidified our place as the kings of the industry. And as it is the season of giving, I want to take a moment to recognize the people who make this possible." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew my name was on the list of bonuses. I had seen the spreadsheet. I had earned it. I needed that bonus to pay for my mother's medical treatments. The secret reason I stayed in this toxic environment. The secret reason I endured his insults. "First," Julian continued, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. A cruel smirk played at the corners of his mouth. "I want to call up someone very special, someone who has been with us through thick and thin, someone who truly represents the humble roots of this company. Elena, please, come up here." The spotlight swung around, blinding me. The room went quiet, the only sound being the rustle of silk and the clinking of ice in glasses as hundreds of people turned to look at the girl in the cheap dress. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking like a countdown on the marble floor. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, despite everything, he was going to acknowledge the work. Maybe this was the Christmas miracle I had been praying for. When I reached the podium, Julian didn't offer a handshake. He didn't offer a smile. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "Elena has been my assistant for 3 years," he told the crowd, his voice laced with a condescension that made my skin crawl. "And in that time, she has shown a remarkable ability to follow instructions. She's the best at getting my coffee exactly at 175 degrees and ensuring my dry cleaning is never a minute late. So, Elena, for your tireless service to my personal comfort, I have a special gift." He handed me the box. The crowd watched, some with pity, most with bored indifference. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside wasn't a check. It wasn't a promotion. It was a keychain. A cheap plastic keychain in the shape of a coffee cup with the words, "World's Okayest Assistant," printed on it. A ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the front row, led by Sarah. "But that's not all," Julian said, leaning into the microphone, his eyes locked onto mine with a terrifying, predatory gleam. "I noticed you've been looking a bit tired lately, Elena. Perhaps the stress of keeping track of my schedule is too much for your limited capacities. So, as my final gift of the night, I'm giving you the one thing you clearly need: a permanent vacation. You're fired, Elena. Effective immediately." Merry Christmas. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Sarah's high-pitched, mocking giggle. I stood there, the plastic keychain digging into my palm, the heat of 1,000 stares burning into my back. I looked at Julian, looking for a shred of humanity. There was only the cold, hard vacuum of his ego. He had done this on purpose. He had waited for the biggest night of the year to humiliate me publicly, to strip me of my livelihood and my dignity in front of the entire industry. He thought I was nothing. He thought I was a bug he could squash under his Italian leather loafers. What Julian Sterling didn't know, what no one in this room of elite vultures knew, was that I wasn't just Elena, the girl from a humble background. They didn't know that my mother's maiden name was Rothschild Vane. They didn't know that the medical treatments I was paying for were for a woman who had been disowned for marrying for love, but whose trust fund had been quietly restored to her only a week ago after the passing of my grandfather. They didn't know that while I was fetching Julian's coffee, I was also managing a private investment portfolio that had tripled in value since the fiscal new year. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I simply looked at the keychain, then looked him dead in the eye. A strange, calm clarity washed over me. The Christmas lights seemed to burn brighter, not as symbols of joy, but as the sparks of a fire I was about to light. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice steady and clear, projecting through the microphone he hadn't yet turned off. "This is exactly what I needed to see. You've made everything very clear." I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't stop at the buffet. I didn't collect my coat. I walked straight out of the Pierre Hotel and into the biting New York wind. The cold felt good. It felt like a whetstone sharpening a blade. As I hailed a cab, I took out my phone. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call my mother. I dialed a private number that connected directly to the head of a major private equity firm. "It's Elena," I said when the voice answered. "I want to execute the Solstice plan. Every share, every debt obligation, every lever we've been tracking. I want the acquisition papers ready by 9 a.m. tomorrow. We're not just taking the company. I want Julian Sterling to find out who I am while he's standing in the wreckage of everything he thinks he owns." As the cab sped through the snowy streets of Manhattan, the red and green lights of the city blurred into a single, vengeful streak. Julian Sterling thought he had given me a permanent vacation. He didn't realize he had just signed the death warrant for his empire. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve, the night of miracles, and I was about to perform a miracle that would bring his whole world crashing down into the slush. The morning of December 24th arrived with a deceptive stillness. New York City was wrapped in a blanket of fresh snow, the kind that makes the world look peaceful and holy. But inside the glass walls of the Sterling & Co.'s headquarters, the air was vibrating with a different kind of energy. I hadn't slept a single wink. While the rest of the world was dreaming of sugar plums and family reunions, I had spent the night in a high-rise war room in Midtown, surrounded by 3 of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in the hemisphere and a team of forensic accountants. We weren't just looking for a way to buy a company. We were performing a surgical extraction of Julian Sterling's soul. By 4 a.m., we had uncovered what I had long suspected. Julian hadn't just been arrogant, he had been desperate. To maintain his lifestyle of private jets and Hamptons estates, he had been over-leveraging the firm's assets, shifting debt into shell companies that were now teetering on the edge of collapse due to the rising interest rates of the late-year market. He was a house of cards, dressed in a tuxedo. My family's reinstated capital was the wind, and I was about to blow. By 7 a.m., the Vane-Rothschild Trust had finalized the lightning-fast acquisition of Sterling & Co's primary debt holder. By 8 a.m., we had triggered a hostile takeover clause that Julian himself had written into the bylaws 3 years ago to protect himself from his board. A clause that now served as his own noose. I arrived at the office at 9 a.m. The lobby was decorated with a massive, glittering Christmas tree, its lights twinkling mockingly at the skeletal crew of employees working the half-day shift. I wasn't wearing my bargain bin black dress today. I was wearing a tailored, midnight blue wool coat and heels that cost more than Julian's monthly car payment. My hair was pulled back in a sharp, uncompromising bun. I didn't look like an assistant anymore. I looked like an executioner. As I walked toward the elevators, the security guard, a man named Marcus, whom I had always been kind to, looked up in shock. "Elena, I heard what happened last night at the gala. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't be here. Mr. Sterling gave strict orders that you weren't to be let into the building." I gave him a soft, chilling smile. "It's all right, Marcus. I'm not here to work for Mr. Sterling. I'm here to see my new property. And don't worry, your job is safe. In fact, you're getting a holiday bonus that's actually worth something this year." I bypassed the security desk before he could respond, using a master key card that my legal team had authorized just 20 minutes prior. The elevator ride to the penthouse floor felt like an ascent to a throne. When the doors opened, the office was quiet, save for the muffled sound of Christmas carols playing over the speaker system. I walked straight toward Julian's office. Sarah, his consultant, was sitting at my old desk, looking hungover from the night before and struggling to operate the espresso machine. She looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief, and then narrowing in malice. "What are you doing here? Julian fired you in front of everyone. Do I need to call security? Or are you just here to beg for your miserable job back? Maybe if you get on your knees and apologize for being such a bore last night, he'll let you be the janitor." I didn't even slow down. I walked past her, my coat sweeping against her desk. "The espresso machine needs a descaling, Sarah, and the beans are burnt, just like your career." I pushed open the heavy oak doors to Julian's private office. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, a glass of scotch already in his hand despite the hour. He looked triumphant, staring out at the snowy skyline of Manhattan like he owned every flake of snow falling over the city. When he heard the door open, he didn't even turn around. "I told you to have my messages screened, Sarah," he barked, his voice raspy. "And tell that pathetic girl, Elena, that if she shows her face around here again, I'll have her blacklisted from every firm in the city. I want her to spend her Christmas at a soup kitchen." "The soup kitchens are actually quite lovely this time of year, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a razor. "But I think you'll find the accommodations at the local bankruptcy court much less inviting." Julian spun his chair around, his face turning a deep, angry shade of purple. He dropped his glass, the scotch staining his expensive rug. "You? How did you get past security? You are trespassing. I'll have you arrested. You're nothing but a coffee fetcher, a glorified servant." I walked over to the chair opposite his desk, the chair reserved for billionaires and board members, and sat down, crossing my legs elegantly. I placed a thick, leather-bound folder on his desk. The gold foil on the front bore the seal of Vane-Rothschild Holdings. "You really should have checked the fine print on those bridge loans you took out in November, Julian," I said calmly. "The ones you used to fund your record-breaking bonuses and that New Year's yacht party you've been bragging about. You see, those loans were sold to a secondary creditor last night, and that creditor has decided to call them in. All of them, effective at noon today." Julian laughed, though it sounded forced and hollow. "You're delusional. You've lost your mind because I fired you. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't have that kind of money. You're a nobody from nowhere." "I'm a Vane, Julian," I said, leaning forward so he could see the absolute lack of mercy in my eyes. My mother was Elizabeth Vane. Does that name ring a bell? Probably not, because you only care about people who can do something for you right now. But my family has been in this city since it was called New Amsterdam. And while I was fetching your coffee, I was watching you. I saw the embezzlement. I saw the tax fraud. I saw how you treated the people who actually built this company while you took all the credit. His face went from purple to a ghostly, sickly white. He reached for the folder, his hands shaking so violently he could barely open it. As he scanned the documents, the proof of my identity, the proof of the acquisition, the notices of default, the bravado drained out of him like water from a cracked vase. This isn't possible, he whispered. The board would never allow this. The board is currently in an emergency Zoom meeting with my lead counsel, I informed him. They were very interested to learn about the special accounts you've been keeping in the Cayman Islands. They've already voted to remove you as CEO for cause, which means you don't get a severance package, you don't get a golden parachute. You get exactly what you gave me last night, a permanent vacation. Outside the window, a massive digital billboard across the street flickered. It was an advertisement for Sterling & Co.'s Christmas charity drive. I watched as the image changed, replaced by a simple, elegant message in gold lettering. Under new management, Vane-Rothschild Holdings. Julian looked at the billboard, then back at me. The man who had humiliated me in front of the entire industry was now trembling in his chair, looking small and pathetic. The power had shifted so fast, the air in the room seemed to thin. He wasn't the king of the world anymore. He was just a man in an expensive suit who had run out of time. "Elena, please," he stammered, his voice cracking. "It's Christmas." I placed the plastic keychain on the center of his mahogany desk with a sharp, hollow click. It looked pathetic, resting on the expensive wood, a cheap monument to his cruelty. "You're right, Julian. It is Christmas, and in the spirit of the season, I'm giving you exactly what you earned." I leaned in, my shadow stretching across his trembling hands. "Last night, you thought you were destroying a servant. Today, you realized you were insulting the hand that feeds you. This keychain is the only thing you're taking with you. Consider it a souvenir of the day you lost everything because you couldn't be a decent human being for 5 minutes." Julian scrambled to his feet, his chair rolling back and slamming into the floor-to-ceiling window. "You can't do this. I built this name. Sterling & Co. is me." He was shouting now, but his voice lacked the thunder of the night before. It was the shrill, desperate whine of a cornered animal. "I'll sue. I'll tell the press you're a corporate raider. I'll ruin your family's name before the new year." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. "The press is already in the lobby, Julian. But they aren't here for me. They're here because a whistleblower, anonymously of course, sent them the digital trail of your offshore accounts and the evidence of the sexual harassment settlements you paid off with company funds. By the time the sun sets on Christmas Eve, Sterling won't be a name associated with power. It will be a synonym for disgrace." The door to the office burst open. 2 men in dark suits, my private security team, stepped inside. Behind them stood Sarah, her face a mask of pure terror, clutching her designer handbag as if it could protect her from the fallout. "Mr. Sterling," the taller guard said, his voice a low, rhythmic drone, "we are here to escort you from the premises. You are no longer authorized to be on this floor. Your personal items will be couriered to your residence once they have been screened for proprietary company data." "Personal items?" Julian gasped, looking around his opulent office as if seeing it for the first time. "My art, my awards. That's a $5 million Picasso on the wall." "That Picasso was purchased with a company loan that was never repaid, Julian," I countered, walking toward the window to watch the snow fall over the city he no longer ruled. "Technically, it belongs to me now. I think I'll donate it to a public museum, somewhere where people like you have to pay admission just to look at it." As the guards took Julian by the arms, he finally broke. The mask of the high-performance CEO shattered completely. He began to beg, sobbing openly, his face wet with tears that held no remorse, only the bitter salt of self-pity. "Elena, please, my daughter's Christmas presents are in the trunk of the company car." "My house is in the company's name. Where am I supposed to go?" "You should have thought about that before you fired a woman whose mother was in the hospital just to get a laugh from a crowd," I said, my back still turned to him. "Security, please take him out through the main lobby. I want him to see the billboard again on his way out." The sounds of his struggle and his fading cries echoed down the hallway until the heavy doors clicked shut, leaving the office in a silence so profound it felt holy. Sarah remained standing by the door, frozen. She looked at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "And Sarah?" I said, finally turning to look at her. She flinched. "I've reviewed your consulting contract. It turns out your services are entirely redundant. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk. If you leave now, I won't press charges for the expenses you charged to the firm for your trip to St. Bart's last month. Consider that my Christmas miracle for you." She didn't say a word. She turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically away into the distance. I walked over to Julian's, now my desk, and picked up the phone. I pressed the button for the intercom that broadcasted to the entire building. "Attention, everyone. This is Elena Vane. As of 10 minutes ago, Vane-Rothschild Holdings has completed the acquisition of this firm. I know many of you are worried about your futures. I want to settle those fears right now. The office is closing immediately for the holiday break. Everyone will receive a year-end bonus equivalent to 20% of their annual salary, effective today. We are discarding the culture of fear and replacing it with a culture of respect. Go home to your families. Have a Merry Christmas. We will rebuild on the 26th. A distant cheer erupted from the floors below, a muffled roar of joy that vibrated through the floorboards. For the first time in 3 years, the air in this building didn't feel heavy. I walked to the private elevator, the one Julian used to keep locked so he wouldn't have to breathe the same air as his employees. I rode it down to the lobby. When the doors opened, the press was there, a sea of flashing lights and shouting voices. But I didn't stop to give them a quote. I walked right past them, out into the crisp, cold New York air. Across the street, Julian was being loaded into a yellow cab, his tailored tuxedo jacket caught in the door. He looked old. He looked finished. He caught my eye for a fleeting second, and in that moment, he saw the girl he had humiliated at the gala. But he also saw the woman who had just dismantled his life with the stroke of a pen. I didn't feel the rush of heat I expected. I felt a cool, calm satisfaction. The snow continued to fall, coating the city in a fresh start. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "The doctors say the new treatment is working. I'll be home for New Year's. I love you." I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes for the first time in years. I hailed my own car, not a company car, but my own. As we pulled away from the curb, leaving the skyscraper and the scandal behind, I looked at the plastic keychain I had kept in my hand. I rolled down the window and let it drop into the dirty slush of the gutter. The world's okayest assistant was gone. The new era had begun. And as the clock struck noon on Christmas Eve, the city felt like it finally belonged to me. I wasn't just a survivor of his cruelty. I was the architect of my own triumph. The lights of the city twinkled like diamonds in the snow. And for the first time in my life, the future looked as bright as a New Year's firework over the harbor.